What's up, homies? Welcome to a review from Heroes Reforged. We are here to talk about The Suicide Squad. Now, it's just Hector and I. Augustine is not here. He is on a 10-day trip, and he hasn't seen the movie yet. You and I went to go see the movie on Tuesday, I think it was. For me personally, going into it, I was very excited to watch this movie because I thought all the trailers were great, and despite how good trailers have been for previous DC movies or even the original Suicide Squad, I had a lot of hope and faith in James Gunn, and especially getting to see characters like Harley Quinn back. You know, I know you and I are really big fans of Birds of Prey, plus the addition of all these amazing new characters. This roster, this cast is just like absolutely insane.
Like the marketing and the trailers have been really great.
Yes.
And it's interesting because like I am a total franchise shill when it comes to certain, I mean, let's be honest, like, you know, I'm a fanboy or whatever other derogatory term. And I think you and I both like love Star Wars, the brand.
Yes.
I love Star Trek, the brand. We love Marvel Cinematic Universe and Marvel, the brand. We love DC Comics, the brand. But this film franchise has been real ups and downs. I'm not excited about the film franchise itself, but I do get excited about individual movies within the thing. Does that make sense? So you and I are massive fans of the DC Comics universe and those characters and stuff, but like the movies have been so heartbreaking, and then other times it's triumphant, and it's crazy that we're getting some stuff like Shazam and now Black Adam and you know, so on and so forth. And it's disappointing that we haven't gotten some stuff in this franchise, in this reality, like another Superman story or a Batman. We're excited about James Gunn. We were excited about seemingly the studio being like, yeah, we hired him. He wrote a script. He went and shot the script. And that's what happened. Like, that was also exciting to get that impression that it was like, okay, cool. It looks like everything went the way it was supposed to go, kind of a thing. I think those are yours and ours personal opinions about some of those movies that have come out of that franchise. And obviously people's mileage varies big time.
Totally.
But we got there. I did a little skirt on the freeway. We got there in time. Adam, what did you think of the movie?
So I'm going to give you my non-spoiler thoughts, and then we'll get into spoilers after the fact. The moment the credits rolled, I was so relieved how much I loved the movie. That's not to say that this is the first DCU movie that I've loved. It's definitely not the case. But I was so happy because the last Suicide Squad movie was what it was, and it has all that baggage. But it felt so amazing for this movie to end, and my immediate reaction was, I love this movie. This movie was great. And the big thing that I told Hector was, it's kind of seamless. And what I mean by that is not that the movie's perfect. You can, if there was reshoots or additional photography or anything like that, you could not tell. It was stitched together so perfectly that it really feels like it's James Gunn's unique, singular take, singular vision from beginning to middle to end. I think we might agree on this too. I was really surprised how strong the third act is, and I think it's my favorite of the three acts. And I think the whole movie's great. Yeah. But I was so impressed with that third act that it really delivers on what the buildup of the first two are. I think what we got from Joel Kinnaman in the first movie, we got so much more from him in this. And he had so much more range as Colonel Rick Flag. He's funnier. He goes through his own emotional arc that I thought was so damn cool. Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn was a huge standout. There are moments and there are scenes in this movie where she absolutely delivers. And even though James Gunn says you don't have to see any of the other previous movies to experience this, which I think is true, if you have been there from Suicide Squad, particularly to Birds of Prey and then to this, it really, it doesn't ignore what's come before. It really it delivers on what that movie set up, what Birds of Prey set up, and then it takes it kind of to the next level. And I love that. And Idris Elba was absolutely awesome in this movie as well. Amanda Waller, or Viola Davis as Amanda Waller, of course, is just like, I don't know how you direct that woman, because she seems so intimidating when she plays this character that I would not dare give her notes or go near her. I would just say, Viola Davis, you do your thing. You're an Academy Award nominated actress. You do you. You do you, ma'am. Hector, what were your initial thoughts of the Suicide Squad?
Sitting there watching it with you, we were laughing. I didn't laugh at every single joke, but I was laughing throughout. I was pretty excited by so much of the action, but not every single piece of action was the most mind-blowing thing I've ever seen. But ultimately, acts 1 and 2, I was like really digging it. And then act 3 happened. And like you, I was like, oh, I love this movie. I think it was pretty incredible. That's me as a movie fan, but also as a big-time DC comic book fan. I was so happy to see how the whole story sort of wrapped up. So like, I think it might be, it's absolutely near the top of movies that are set in the DC extended universe. I think I still might love Birds of Prey just a little bit more because Birds of Prey felt, how can I put this? It felt even more of a breath of fresh air, but it's almost like with the Suicide Squad, with the talent involved, with that cast, and with the with coming off of how Warner Brothers put out Birds of Prey, I was almost like, yeah, good, we're still keeping this train going. And it wasn't so much like oh my God, where did this come from? Because, you know, you got to remember, Birds of Prey was their first rated R movie in this franchise, released in theaters. And
it also came out like a really weird time because it came out in February last year.
Yes.
And we pretty much went into a pandemic lockdown right after that movie came out.
Yes, exactly. So I love moments of and really like Aquaman and Shazam. They are a little uneven. Aquaman is ridiculous, but it's like a Fast and Furious movie. It's cheesy. It's over the top. There's some comic book goodness in it. There's an octopus playing the drums. So I love Shazam and Aquaman for being as fun as they are. Yeah, but then Birds of Prey came out and I was like, oh my God, I didn't know that I would love a take like this with this point of view, with these characters this much. I fell in love with it. And this movie feels like a spiritual successor, but I think it's because James Gunn and then Kathy Yan, who directed Birds of Prey, and Christina Hodgson wrote it. I think all of those talent, they really got into those characters and I think depicted them in a way where I was like, yes, I am on board. Plus, James Gunn was asked, did you watch Birds of Prey? Did you read the script? Did you like go off of that? And he said that he fully wrote the Suicide Squad before even reading the script for Birds of Prey or watching Birds of Prey. And that's insane to me. And I feel like what James Gunn, and then he went on to say, that's because Harley Quinn is such a specific character. She's up there with Batman and Superman and Spider-Man, these icons, because he understands Harley Quinn the same way that the filmmakers of Birds of Prey, as like, she is a woman who works best when she is now divorced from the Joker, removed from the Joker. And both of those movies, man, they go into that. And so does the Suicide Squad, like you were saying earlier, Adam, to an extent, not fully. It's not a full exploration of Harley as a character, and she's part of this ensemble. I think that it just speaks to James Gunn's understanding of the character and knowing what to tap into from the comic book depiction, from the comic book version. To sum up, overall, non-spoiler thoughts, I really love this movie. I'm so happy that it exists. I would be happy to see it turn into a little mini series if James Gunn does return after the Peacemaker show to do the Suicide Squad 2 or another adventure, you know, with some of these same characters, and for him to bring up new characters. I would be very happy. And Adam, even though you and I were walking up to this movie talking about how, isn't it weird that there's 2 Suicide Squad movies, but only 1 Superman and technically no Batmans in this iteration, in this reality, in this franchise? At this point, I'm like, whatever. I don't care. I stopped trying to look at the DC universe on film in that way because I don't think it'll ever be that. I don't think it will ever be the DC animated universe put up on screen or this incredibly tight, well-constructed thing. In a lot of ways, it's similar to the comics. They're not always the most well planned out and thought out stuff, but just the comics can just use all the characters and
they just draw them in.
So yeah,
I would definitely recommend watching it in an IMAX theater because that's the way James Gunn shot the movie. Spoilers. This movie starts with being introduced to Savant, Michael Rooker's character, and we learn that he's really good at throwing a ball at targets on a wall and then kills a bird. I was actually kind of surprised how quickly this movie just kind of goes into the story, and it was actually kind of refreshing. The first Suicide Squad movie definitely spent some time doing setup, and I think James Gunn being aware of that was like, I don't really think we need to. I think we can very quickly, with just a few lines of exposition, quickly explain what the concept of the Suicide Squad is for people who maybe didn't see the last one or don't remember, and then just get into the story. So I really loved all that. Shout out to John Ostrander, who has an amazing cameo as the doctor who injects them with the chip that they put in the back of their head that if they go off mission, Amanda Waller can blow them up, basically. But I was so surprised how many of these characters, and I had a feeling that somewhere in the beginning of the movie, a lot of these characters that we were going to get introduced to are going to die. I just didn't realize how damn fast.
Yeah, I felt like
ton of
Pete
them get
Davidson's
killed.
character wasn't going to make it. Maybe Weasel
Yeah.
wasn't going to make it. You know, maybe Javelin wasn't going to make it. Like I saw some of these like C and D and F list characters, Z-list
Mongal.
characters that they pulled up. It was wild, and then Boomer died. Like, and you and I were like, what? Like, this is crazy. But it was ballsy, and I think it was the right call. And yeah, James Gunn just was asked, how come he brought some characters back from the first movie, but not all the characters, or why did he pick those specific characters? And he said, those were the ones that best served the story. Even Boomerang dying at the beginning made me, first of all, you could easily bring back Jai Courtney in flashbacks. I would not be surprised if he's in the Flash movie in some kind of a flashback. Like you could still do that, and he could still be Captain Boomerang in the DC world. But also, let's not forget, in the comic book universe, Captain Boomerang, the original, has a son who then takes up the mantle. So I didn't think about that until like a day or two later. I was like, wait a minute, they could easily do that and bring in another actor to play Jai Courtney's character's son, and he wants to get revenge or whatever. But anyway, it was ballsy.
Super
it was fun.
bummed though.
Yeah.
I was so sad because I was like, oh man, Jai Courtney was probably like my favorite part of the original Suicide Squad movie. And I think that actor, I think Jai Courtney kind of gets a little bit of beef sometimes for his acting abilities, but I thought he was so good as Captain Boomerang. So good. And the scene he has with the Flash was great. So I really thought like, cool, we're going to get to do more with this character. And in James Gunn's hands, he's going to be even better than he was in the previous movie. And I was definitely thinking, you know, too many steps ahead of like, I'd love to see him show up in a future, if they ever did, you know, like some sort of like Legion of Doom-esque type of movie, or if they did a Flash movie where he could be a villain. So for him to get killed in the very beginning, I was like, oh man. But like you're saying, it sort of makes sense for the story and for the evolution of what the Suicide Squad is, for us to not really focus on those original members. Clearly, they're not going to kill off Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn. Of course not. So yeah,
but they did make us think that her and Rick Flag died in an explosion. They did.
Totally.
And then when they pivoted to the 5 other characters, I was like, this is so funny and so smart. There's just so much about this movie as a DC Comics fan to love.
Yes.
I just love everything that James Gunn pulled from DC Comics in a way that takes the piss out of it a little bit.
Yeah.
But he loved these characters. He loves Polka Dot Man. David DeSmallchin is heartbreaking in this movie.
So good.
You know, I loved what they did with King Shark. It definitely comes from, I think, the DNA of Groot and the thinking behind that character, but so funny and so you just love that big monster character immediately. And Sylvester Stallone and Steve Agee did a great job of like depicting that character.
And it was cool to see Steve Agee play a different character in the movie as well.
Sean Gunn played Calendar Man for like one scene, and I'm like, that's awesome. You know, it's just like how he was Rocket and Kraglin in the Guardians movies.
I think that's what's so cool about this movie is that there are a ton of those sorts of Easter eggs all around this movie.
Yes.
And they're done very creatively. Like Palm Clementif even shows up as one of the dancers in like the bar scene.
Yeah, that was her, right?
That was her.
That's crazy.
So that's what I really loved is that James Gunn is very aware of the comic books. Obviously, I mean, he talked to no end about how much this was so heavily inspired by the '80s Ostrander run.
Yes.
Obviously, he gives him he gives him that cameo at the beginning of the movie. And I think the movie itself, the thing that I think I loved so much about it was it is a modern film, obviously, but it's also does play out like a throwback to the 80s. You know, we were talking in the car after the movie, and you mentioned A-Team, and it totally has that A-Team, you know, 80s Stallone, Schwarzenegger vibe to it. And I like Predator or whatever. And I really, really enjoyed that. The one thing that really surprised me that I didn't know I was going to enjoy were how creative the titles were, because it kind of plays out a little bit like a graphic novel where we go from, it seems like chapter to chapter,
issue to issue a little bit.
Yeah. And the way he uses the environment, whether it's twigs or flames or body parts to show you what the names of the titles are or where we are in the story, was so creative. And so I think like that for me was what really made this feel like a comic book adaptation without trying to be overly silly, without trying to hit the humor on the nail too hard, but also without being violent for the sake of violence. Like this movie is R-rated and it is violent, and we see Nanaue like literally tear people in half and we see people get crushed. But there is a little bit of lightheartedness, a little bit of humor sometimes when those things happen. It never felt like it didn't fit. Everything always felt like it was, it really is serving servicing the story, which I was really happy about, because I know that we've had conversations in the past about DC trying to lean into this like R-rated territory. And I'm of the camp that I think it very much can fit certain comic book adaptations. I don't think you can apply it to every single one of these characters. But for me, for Suicide Squad, I think it's very appropriate. Does it have to have it? No. Does it give it just a little extra something by it being rated R? Yes, it's a little bit, it's able to breathe a little bit more. You know, we don't have to worry about some of the restrictions of it being a PG-13 movie. So I really enjoyed all of that.
You said earlier which ones kind of stole the show for you. I do want to mention Daniela Melchior as Ratcatcher 2. Cleo, Ratcatcher 2.
Yeah.
She is the heart of the film.
Yeah.
And her and Idris Elba have the strongest relationship in the movie. There were moments that right at the end when she's holding the thing and all the rats are crawling up on Starro, and she's crying because she's thinking about her dad, where I was just like, this is beautiful, man. This is the kind of thing, this is the stuff where like in Guardians 2, when Peter Quill thinks about his life and his family and his friendships, to give him the power to defeat the villain. And if I'm sucked into the movie, these movies now, I've seen them already. If I see Suicide Squad again, and I'm planning on seeing it again, if I'm getting sucked into the movie and I'm really into it, that stuff could bring me to tears. I love that stuff. And that came from a character named Ratcatcher 2. And it just goes to show that James Gunn is an expert at taking the characters from these universes that are more than often overlooked and being able to really shine them off and be like, but look at this little pearl. Look at this little amazing thing I could bring forward. And he did it with Polka Dot Man. And I mean, I think you and I both kind of felt like he was going to die, but it was still like, he just had so many great moments throughout.
When the character in your trailer says, I'm a superhero, you're like, that man is dying.
Right there.
But like you said, David Dastmalchian is so good in all of the, whether it's DC Marvel or non-DC Marvel stuff. He's such a good actor, and he kind of flies under the radar a lot. But if you guys haven't seen Prisoners, go watch that. He's so good in that movie, and plenty of other stuff. I know you mentioned Blade Runner 2049.
Blade Runner.
So it's so cool to see a character like that go through the emotional journey that he goes through, while at the same time, he's like haunted by this vision of his mother, who was a star lab scientist who tried to make him and his siblings superheroes and fails. And it's just like the balance of that, of the humor and the pain and the suffering and the drama, it's done so incredibly well. I should have expected it from Guardians of the Galaxy. I think the thing that he did so well was it's not Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, he did something different with this. And I think he needed to. And I'm sure maybe there were some people who had some apprehension about him doing this and it feeling like that, but it's two very different movies. Very different movies.
This to me, I think, is the perfect Suicide Squad movie. It is the perfect story to take the Suicide Squad as a DC comic idea and give them a big budget movie. And it did feel like the 80s. And one of the things I really appreciated about the movie, while also it being not my favorite, again, I mentioned those first two acts or watching the movie, and the fact that it felt that much like an homage and a love letter to the John Ostrander stuff. I read some of that older Suicide Squad, kind of the initial comics that came out. I think I read like the first two volumes when they collected them in paperbacks. And it's not my favorite. And a lot of it is kind of a little bit dated, and it's definitely of its time, because I think it has that sort of Cold War mentality. Look, you watch movies from the 80s, they all have that same sort of thing. They all view like the United States a certain way, and they all view like foreign countries and Latin American countries a certain way. So then James Gunn comes in and he does his movie, and it's set in a fictional Latin American country. And it is about a squad of these American commandos, essentially, from an American prison system / government thing, whatever. They just go and they blow shit up and they do all this stuff. And I wasn't feeling that there was necessarily a lot of nuance. And then we got to Alicia Braga's character, who's like, she represents the native people there, the people that are trying to take back Corto Maltese.
Corto Maltesians.
The Corto Maltesians that are trying to rise up. And so I think James Gunn was still savvy and kind of aware of that stuff. Even the fact that Daniela Melchior plays Ratcatcher 2, and she's one of the main heroines of the film, Idris Elba being another one, and these were people of color. But you still have scenes where it's like John Cena, who's hysterical in the movie, Joel Kinnaman, these big macho American guys. And Idris Elba's character, even though he's British, he still is coming from like a US government. So there's just lots of stuff involved in there. But I've been seeing people talk about how this movie is an anti-war film and it is a commentary on US foreign policy, which I think it is. So it's a little bit of trying to have its cake and eat it too. It's a little bit of like, yeah, but we want to do like something in a Latin American country. And the reason DC Comics created Corto Maltese is because politically they weren't going to set stories in like rough areas in Latin America. They're not going to do that because that's shitty to do, and that's very anyway. There's a bunch of stuff that James Gunn was pulling from, and a lot of that were those original comics. But then we get to the third act, and I'm seeing some nuance. And then Starro happened, and I was like, well, now I have no choice but to love this movie. Here's another like thing that made my heart swell, but also it's kind of a crushing disappointment, is the fact that in this movie, the Suicide Squad defeat and kill Starro the Conqueror. In live action, Starro is in a movie, and he was terrifying, and he was still silly, but he was, it's something where like James Gunn has said he has been terrified of this character since he first learned about him as a kid.
Yeah.
And read about him in a comic book, because when you're a kid and you read DC comics that have Starro, like Starro's like fucking scary. Like it's crazy. And they did it in the movie. He shot out his little, the little face huggers, and yet the character still looks kind of squishy and pink and blue and kind of cartoony in a way. Adorable in a way. So I was just like on cloud nine, the fact that I was watching what I was watching, and Harley taking him down and all that stuff. But then the crushing disappointment sets in where it's like, oh, there will never be a movie where the Justice League of America, the Justice League, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman will take down Starro the Conqueror. Like the good DC characters will never deal with him, because the ones we didn't care about before, the Z-listers and Harley Quinn and stuff, defeated him. And that's kind of beautiful and that's great. But it's like, it would be as though the Guardians of the Galaxy took down Thanos, and Thanos never got to Earth. You know what I mean? Like that's what it would be like.
And the Avengers
be like, where it'd be like, cool, I got to see Thanos in a movie and it was pretty cool. Okay, I guess they're not doing any of the rest of the stuff that Thanos does normally in the comics, So it's I'm teasing. It's not really that heartbreaking, but there is really truly a side of me that's like wild that this lives in a movie universe where like we don't know what Superman's up to.
Yeah. Well, he's in the ICU, I guess.
He was at some point. I'm sure he got better, but
sitting in there and watching all that unfold, and then seeing how certain characters double cross the characters, Peacemaker in particular. We got to talk about John Cena and that show.
Awesome.
He's just so charming, and having him and Idris Elba go through that village with all the rebels and then killing every single one of those rebels, and then finding Colonel Rick Flag and Sol Soria and her being like, we're the rebels. You just wiped out my entire team. And those two that whole time just one-upping each other. It is the most violent but hilarious and surprising scene, one of the best scenes of the movie. And it made me really, really excited to see what James Gunn and John Cena are going to do for the Peacemaker series. And there was obviously that huge discussion of whether or not it was going to be a sequel, a prequel. People were saying, well, if he survives the movie, if he's getting a show, doesn't that mean he survives? And James Gunn telling people like, well, it could be a prequel. It could be beforehand. And the movie, obviously, with its 2 post-credit scenes, reveals to us that like he is in fact alive. Also, one of my favorite scenes in the movie was Harley Quinn's escape from the President's Mansion.
Mind-blowingly good. I loved it. And then the javelin, and then the flowers, and yeah, it's hard not to think about how Margot Robbie is Robert Downey Jr. with Iron Man, up to that level, like Hemsworth with Thor. We're just like, oh man, they found the perfect person, and they turned this character into this thing that's just so incredible, but it is so like the comics at the same time. Like, and people were even saying like Hugh Jackman Wolverine, and man, he did such a great job with that role, but I got to give it to Margot. That she's even more pitch perfect, because it's like she literally looks like she stepped out of a comic book. And the voice and the performance and the just everything has been so great. Yeah, Birds of Prey, The Suicide Squad is such a great double feature. It's such a good
Oh my god. I might just do that this weekend, honestly.
Yeah, man. I got Birds of Prey on Blu-ray. Like HBO Max is going to be queued up, and I might do that double feature. I love her, and she watches our stuff, so shout out to Margot Robbie.
We love you.
Yeah.
It's such a tough movie to talk about, because we could easily sit here and go through every single moment, every single scene, every single character highlight. And I feel like you would be here for 3 hours, because genuinely every character, almost every scene, every act of this movie has something amazing to offer.
Dude, I liked the character Milton, background guy named Milton.
Who's Milton?
Ended up being such a great, like, I liked him, the driver, and he's there the whole time. And then when he died, I was like, aw, like I was really sad. That whole thing was so great, man.
Yeah,
but yeah, you're right. You can pretty much take any character, any story moment, any joke, and we could talk about it for 15 minutes, and then we would be here for 4
hours. It would be the James Gunn cut of the Suicide Squad. Closing thoughts. Love the movie. Thought it was so damn good. I want us to be able to continue the conversation with the community. We didn't even get to talk about, characters like the Thinker, the history that they kind of talk about, how that's been here for 30 years. But I want to be able to talk to the audience more about that, whether it's on Discord or in the comments below. Let us know your thoughts if you've seen this movie already. If you haven't joined our Discord yet, jump on over. I definitely want to continue having the conversation there because I think this movie is really, really strong and a perfect example for if we could get more directors who are as passionate about the comic books and filmmaking as James Gunn. And that's not to say that previous directors have not been that. We've definitely had some that are like that, and who really know how to take these characters to sort of the next level. And I think like this universe, whether it's connected or not, has a pretty bright and prosperous future. So very excited about this movie. Go check it out, The Suicide Squad in IMAX, and jump on over and let's talk about it. We'll see you guys in the next review.